being perceived as racist is like, that's the last thing you want somebody to think about you, right? And so how do we avoid that? Well, we just avoid the topic of race at all, right? I'm colorblind. I transcend race, Well, that's not true, right? Because anytime you see a person of color, you recognize that that's a person of color, right? You may not say that out loud, and you may not ever talk about it, but you're aware of it, right? You have to be. It's just reality.
I grew up in Muncie, Indiana, which is a small, sort of small city outside of Indianapolis, about 45 minutes or so. Growing up, obviously I was a dark-skinned child, so my thoughts of race was pretty much not necessarily, I was kind of oblivious to other races in terms of skin tone, but it was more of a focus inward in regards to just a different, I guess, spectrum of color in regards to being an African American.
So for me personally, I never ever thought about race growing up. I never thought of myself as a white person, I just thought of myself as a person, an individual. And that, I think that's a unique experience for, white people because we're the majority of the population. We don't think of ourselves in racial terms.
Yeah, so I'm from El Paso, Texas, maybe 15, 20 minutes from the border of Juarez, Mexico, and Texas. I would say 70% of the people I came in contact with were Hispanic, 20% black, and maybe 10% or 5% Asian, 5% white. It was very Hispanic-oriented demographic.
As a teacher, I worked with white teachers. I worked with white principals. I come from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and that's the city where the governor stood in the state university door and said, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
That's all we learned in school. We watched movies like The Root, and that would make me very angry. We would watch playbacks of Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights days, them getting hosed and and the dogs being sicked on them. And whenever they showed it, everybody's face looked at the white kid. It don't matter how cool they were for that moment. Man, it made things weird.
There was an instance in my middle school days where a lot of the African American students were kind of rallying together and trying to figure out what that culture's like and what it's like to be, a black man or something like that, and actually kind of incited this weird confrontation that went on for months in my school, where a bunch of black dudes carrying, black power picks, and then they're wearing them in their hair and their afro, and then you had, some of the more country, white dudes carrying around rebel flags, saying, okay, well, and so you saw this kind of tension and stuff, which was really just, wow,
My first job, I was like a busboy / waiter, and my hair was even bigger than it is now. And so I really was like, I'm Goku, this is so fun. And I think that I used to really take pride in that. But I think when I became a Christian, not saying that's what I identified more with, but I think the things that I clung to before kind of faded back more in the background.
For me, growing up, most of the growing up when I was younger, most of the racial tensions that I would face were not direct racism, where it seemed like it was from hatred. It was more of people saying things and they didn't realize how offensive they were to me. So for example, people would say things like, I would meet someone's parents and they'd say, oh, you're so well-spoken, or you're so articulate, or something like that. That's something I still hear to this day, and kind of frustrating. But one of the biggest things I would hear growing up is, oh, you're not really black, or you're a white guy trapped in a black's body, or people would use the term Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. And people use that terminology. I think they were just joking around because I didn't fit into the stereotypical mold of someone who is black. But I think the reason why that was so frustrating to me is because they'd say, oh, you're not black. So then if I'm not black, but I look at my skin and I'm not white, then what am I?
I remember one day, I was in 6th grade, I got in the car, my dad was picking me up from school, and a buddy walked past me, and I said, I was kind of like, what's up? He's like, what's up? And my dad said to me, he's like, man, Phil, that's so cool. I said, what's cool? He's like, man, you're friends with a black guy. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, he's black. I said, yeah, and he's like, that's just cool. He said, for him, he said that didn't happen much growing up. And so for me, it was like, I acknowledged, I knew he was black, but to me, I'm like, I don't base who I hang out with based on what he looked like or what. To me, he's still a buddy of mine.
Well, this affects me personally because I am married to a black man, and when we have children, our children will be biracial. They will be black and they will be white. However, their skin is most likely going to be darker, and they will more likely be perceived by society as black.
The most recent experience that I probably had was just an individual just trying to get to know me, just asking questions about my background and education. And I told him that I had a master's degree, and you could just tell by the look on that person's face of how like they were kind of taken back, like, oh wow, you're educated. It's like, well, am I not supposed to be? Is that, and I can't say necessarily because I'm black, but I mean, what other difference, could that be?
We went to a restaurant, and there was a lady trying to order IHOP, I think, or something like that. And the lady was like, hey, if you want to speak Spanish, go back to where you came from or something, stuff like that. And it's difficult to deal with that stuff.
I'm not a confrontational person, but I get really, really angry when my husband is treated unfairly. And he was walking to class one day on campus with his book bag on and was stopped by security, and they questioned him, like, are you a student here? They had to call the office and have his ID checked to make sure that he was actually a student.
I think one way that people have not cared for Filipinos well is that they have been entertained by their caring and loving nature, that they don't really get to know them. I think because of that, Filipinos really suffer from a lack of relationship with people in general. That they might say they have it, but we say that all the time. Filipinos and Asian cultures, we all wear masks.
I've seen or heard or read the stories of, the Tuskegee experiment or, Henrietta Lacks. I've heard and I've read these things. I saw the picture of Emmett Till, I know what that looks like in picture. And so the face is certainly different. There's probably not anybody that's gonna come and place a cross in my yard. But the injustices that are systemic are real. It's not a figment of our imagination. The silence of the church is not a figment of my imagination. And the anger that I feel and that many of us feel is not unjustified. And so certainly it's real and it's still here, and we got to uncover it.
Because we tend to hang out with people who look like us and think like us and talk like us, there's a dissonance between what I think and feel and the way that I act and the attitude I have, and then the way this group thinks and feels and acts and the attitude that they have. And so I'm ignorant of what these people are thinking and feeling, and vice versa. And so until there's that gap is bridged and people are talking to each other and trying to identify with each other and understand one another, then we'll be talking about the same thing in two different ways.
I think so. For me, I think the thing that I've tried doing, and I think it does work well, and I've seen other people, is you acknowledge that there are differences. Again, you have to stop saying, "I'm colorblind." You're not. There are differences, and I think you listen to people and you hear their stories and you do life with those people and you learn from them.
I think it starts with situations of right here that we're having, and for me, it starts with me engaging my brothers and sisters in Christ who may not look like me, so not necessarily even white, but Asian, Indian, and wherever place they're from that's not here in the United States, or that they are not African American, and having those conversations. And from those conversations, I feel like it'll build some type of just awareness and understanding. And from that understanding, I think it builds community.
I think it's in the context of relationships where the worst of you can actually come out. You can actually talk about real problems. I think when you are real with yourself, you can actually have real progress and steps forward, Christian or non-Christian. I think it's just good counsel.
Most people don't want to intentionally hurt other people, and so if I'm entering into a conversation and there's a risk that I might offend someone, it's so much easier to just not go into that conversation at all. But the thing that most people don't understand is when you don't have those conversations, then those unintentional offenses just build up, and then there's a breaking point.
I think the intention that has to come from people other than African American, only because I feel like we already have. And it's like, man, they're different from me. What we're going to talk about, what we're going to do. But little do you know, when you think about all that, you'll get to know that person and start to like them for who they are, and get to laugh about the music they listen to and joke about the cultural differences. But then that's what bonds you. That's what bonds you, is having those conversations. And now you have a friend, not a white friend. You have a friend, not a Mexican friend or a black friend. And so it kind of tears down those dividing walls with those conversations.
Just educating yourself as much as you can, reading a book, and not saying I have a black friend and I can get all the answers from them. No, you can't. We're not monolithic. We're not homogenous. We're different. Somebody's going to have a different opinion from me, and that's okay. But can we come together to just listen, talk, and push forward?
I would say realize that, like, some of us, there are several people who are really trying. It may not look like it, but there are several people who are trying to understand. There are several people who really want to help the issue.
As a white dude, we don't talk about race, we don't think about race, and it's almost instinctively like instilled in you that to talk about race is wrong. To acknowledge that there are differences in experience or something based on race, that just sounds wrong. But it's not wrong. And what I found is that it's welcomed. It's a welcomed topic of conversation. Because people are already talking about it. You may not be, but they are. And to enter into that conversation, that's a good thing. You should try to do that.
Yeah, you just gotta jump. You just gotta dive head in. There's no way that you can prepare yourself for it to not really be awkward.
But I think that the perpetuation of racism is the indifference and the silence of us all. I don't want to pin it on one race or the other. Many times we all are silent when we see sin and don't call it out,
There are racial injustices that happen every single day, and we have to acknowledge the issue, and we have to realize that we need to come together over this.
This is my prayer. Give me a boldness to not take on the responsibility of making everybody else feel comfortable when it comes to injustices. I think I might leave it there.